Hello dear viewers, and welcome to this amazing video about the debit and credit concept. What you need to understand when we talk about accounting is that it's actually double entry bookkeeping. Okay, so when you want to register a transaction in Odoo, you always need to have a balanced journal entry. You have one part on the debit side and one part on the credit side, and debit must always equal credit. You can't register a transaction without this rule being granted. Depending on how your accounts that you're using are behaving on the debit and credit side, it will have an impact on your reports. So for example, if you want to register a salary entry, on one side, on the debit side, you're going to have the expense of your employee's cost, okay? And you're going to need a counterpart, and this counterpart is the employee's debt. And in that case, you're using a current liabilities account. Basically, it's what you owe to the employee and what you're going to have to pay them at the end of the month. So let's see together how the different accounts work. So for active account, let's start with that. Let's say, for example, that you buy a new car. The car itself needs to be accounted for in your balance sheet in a fixed asset account. For active accounts, if you want to increase the value of this type of accounts, then you will put the amount on the debit side. In our example, as you buy a new car, it's an additional value that you want to include in your asset and thus in your active part of your balance sheet. So the value of the car will be put on the debit side of the accounts in the accounting entry related to the purchase of the car. Let's now switch to passive accounts. Passive accounts work the other way around than active accounts. Let's take the following example. You receive a vendor bill for the purchase of furniture, for example. The debt you owe to your vendor is to be represented in your payable account. So it's your vendor bill debt, the thing that you're going to have to pay at the end when the vendor bill is due. Payables accounts are part of your liabilities, which is also part of the passive accounts of the balance sheet. In that case, if you need to increase the amount of liability that you have, in our case we have a new debt that we owe to our vendor, the value of the debt needs to be represented on the credit side of the payable account. For expense account, we're going to stick to the same example with the vendor bill. We'll see that deeper in the next videos, but the vendor bill is always composed of two accounts, a payable account and an expense account. A vendor bill represents a debt to your vendor, but it's also where you record the costs that you need to represent in your profit and loss statement. In our example, the purchase of furniture is an additional cost that we want to show in our P&L. In order to do that, the value of the cost will be put on the debit side of the account. If we combine this with the previous example, with the passive accounts, we see that the idea of the double entry is now complete, because on the debit side, you're going to have the expense account, and then its counterpart is going to be on the credit side with the payable account. Lastly, for income accounts, let's take an example. If you sell to your customers some products, you will generate an invoice. The sale of goods represents an income to your company, so it's a positive thing. This income needs to be represented in your P&L statements. When you want to increase the value of your income accounts, you need to put this amount on the credit side. So you can see here that the behavior is similar. So passive and active are contrary. So active will increase on the debit side and passive accounts will increase on the credit side. And that's the same thing for expenses and income. So exactly the same. That's all for me in this video. Thank you for watching. Ciao a tutti.